The restaurant gleamed with an elegance that bordered on sterile, the kind of beige perfection my parents adored, where the waitstaff whispered as though words could chip the polished marble floors. I arrived 3 minutes early, yet the moment I stepped through the revolving doors, I felt late, as if everyone else had already taken their places in a scene rehearsed without me. My sister was radiant, as always, occupying the center of attention, as if the room itself had been built to frame her. Her hair was immaculately styled, her lipstick flawless, her laugh deliberate, yet seemingly effortless. She spoke with that polished cadence of someone who always expected to be listened to, a cadence I had memorized years ago from the sidelines. She greeted me with an air kiss, the type you reserve for acquaintances at fundraisers, not siblings who once shared a bunk bed. "You made it," she said, her voice dripping with that breathy, patronizing warmth she deployed at family events. My smile in response felt sharp like a paper cut. My mother hugged me stiffly, all perfume and posture. My father nodded a mechanic's nod in a grocery aisle. No one asked about my drive, no one asked about my day. Instead, I was led to the very end of the long dining table tucked beside a decorative ficus, and across from my cousin's new boyfriend, a man who introduced himself twice, both times getting my name wrong. He smiled sheepishly, but I didn't correct him. What was the point? My presence was already an afterthought. I reminded myself of why I was there. Not to collect sympathy, not to stir drama, but to extend a hand, one final gesture of grace. Inside my bag sat an envelope whose corners had softened from being handled too many times. Inside was money I had saved carefully, quietly, a sum large enough to matter, but not so large it could be mistaken for a stunt. It wasn't just about the money. It was a message, a symbol. Despite the past, despite the slights, despite being perpetually relegated to the background, I wanted to show that I still believed in connection, that I could rise above bitterness, that I was willing to make amends in a language my parents would understand: generosity. Dinner began with a hum, the low buzz of conversations blending into the clink of silverware. My sister launched into stories about her latest conference presentation, a tale that seemed to stretch endlessly, each detail drawing my parents further into her orbit. Their faces glowed with admiration, as though she were reciting sacred scripture. I listened quietly, my own accomplishments kept on the shelf. When I mentioned almost hesitantly that I had just landed a significant freelance project, my mother blinked and asked flatly, "That's nice. Do you get health benefits with that?" The dismissal was swift, efficient, and final. By the time soup arrived, I had been asked exactly 2 questions, neither of which was about me. Then came the toast. My sister stood champagne, flute-raised smile, calibrated like the face of a political candidate. "I just want to say thank you to everyone here tonight," she began, voice dripping with charm, "for coming to celebrate the 2 people who raised me into the woman I am today." Applause broke out on cue. I clapped to trained reflex. She turned toward my parents with the kind of warmth you bottle and sell in advertisements. "And especially, I want to thank them for raising the most amazing only child anyone could ever ask for." Time fractured. I waited for the laugh, for the correction, for anyone to acknowledge the absurdity. My mother lifted her glass. My father beamed the same rehearsed smile he wore for Christmas cards. Silence, polished and unbroken. Not even a flicker in my direction. I could have burst into flames, and the only reaction would have been a waiter refilling water glasses. The air thinned around me, dull and still, like the static hum of a joke I had never been let in on. I stood before I realized I was moving. My hand reached for the envelope in my bag, the one I had carried with such trembling hope. I walked calmly to the center of the room, no glass clinking, no preamble, just my voice even and steady. "I had something prepared to give to the people who raised me," I said, "but I think there's been a misunderstanding." Heads turned. Confusion rippled. My sister's face slackened, her smile faltering. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. My father's jaw clenched, silent and unreadable. Across the room at the back table sat my aunt and uncle, the quiet constants of my life invited tonight as second-string relatives placeholders for sympathy. Their eyes widened. My aunt's hand fluttered to her chest. My uncle stiffened, caught between standing and shrinking into the floor. I walked toward them, placed the envelope in their hands, and said simply, "This is for you." No theatrics, no explanation. Just truth delivered in the plainest form I knew. Then I sat down. Silence spread like smoke. Forks froze mid-air. The hum of chatter collapsed into suffocating stillness. My sister blinked furiously as if rebooting. My mother tilted her head, searching for a way to make what she had just witnessed charming. My father's jaw tightened further. My aunt and uncle stared at the envelope like it was ticking. The rest of the dinner passed in silence, thick enough to choke on. No one asked questions. No one dared break the spell. But for the first time all night, I breathed, truly breathed, because I was no longer waiting for permission, for validation, for acknowledgement. They had raised an only child after all. I had simply redirected my gratitude to the ones who had actually seen me. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them. That night, I finally did. The morning after the dinner, my phone buzzed with a single notification. A message from my aunt, short and simple, a lone question mark. Nothing more, nothing less. It carried more weight than any paragraph my parents had ever written to me. That single curl of ink spoke of shock, confusion, hesitation. It asked 100 questions at once. Why? What did it mean? Was it real? Did I intend it? I stared at the screen for an hour before I called. They answered on speakerphone. I could hear my aunt's breath, first shaky but steadying, then my uncle's quiet presence beside her. "We haven't opened it," she said softly. My lips curled into a smile they couldn't see. "You can," I replied. There was rustling paper sliding free, and then silence. Not a gasp, not an exclamation, just stillness so complete I could feel it through the phone. My aunt's voice finally broke the silence, trembling. No, sweetheart. This can't be right." My uncle cleared his throat, voice rough. "Are you sure we don't want to cross a line?" "You're not?" I said, leaning back against my couch cushions. "You never have." The silence deepened, this time heavier, fuller. They had just discovered the amount, $50,000. Not a check waiting to be returned. Not a promissory note with strings attached. A real transfer sitting in a joint account in both their names. Money I had saved with intent, money that once was meant for my parents. My aunt's words shook as they spilled. "We didn't do anything to deserve this." "You didn't have to," I said quietly. "You showed up. You loved me. You saw me. That was more than enough." I thought that would be the end of it. A clean conclusion. A chapter closed with clarity. Gratitude repaid in the only currency that seemed fitting for years of unasked-for kindness. But of course that's not how my family works. 5 hours later, my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't warmth that waited on the other end. The first call was from my mother. I didn't answer. The second came with a voicemail. Her voice practiced and sharp. "You made your point. This is some kind of stunt. It wasn't funny. Call me back." The third call came from my sister. I ignored it. She followed with a text, the words practically vibrating with indignation. "Was that real? Like, the money you were actually going to give them that much? Why they didn't even raise you? You're being dramatic. You humiliated us." I didn't answer. Instead, I laughed. A short, sharp laugh that escaped before I could stop it. The absurdity of it all folded in on itself. Humiliation, she said, as though being erased as a sibling in a public toast hadn't already been humiliation of the cruelest kind. By evening, my father had joined the offensive. He doesn't usually text, he considers full sentences feminine, and emojis the work of radicals. But apparently, this situation called for him to break protocol. His message: we need to talk face to face. Not like this. Which in my father's language translated to, I don't know how to spin this yet, but give me time. The following days became what I now call the regroup phase. My parents spun their narrative, tried to contain the fallout. Suddenly, I was the unstable daughter, the emotional one, the attention seeker. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years popped into my inbox bearing carefully worded inquiries. Hey, I heard there was some drama at the dinner. You okay? What did you say to Aunt Lorna? Mom's freaking out. I didn't answer. I didn't explain. I didn't craft a counter story for the family grapevine. I let them talk themselves dizzy in the vacuum I left. We'd like to come in, my mother said. No. She blinked, startled. My father's gaze slid past me into my living room, as though searching for evidence of my supposed instability hiding in the couch cushions. You don't want to talk this through? He asked. You didn't seem interested in talking, I said evenly, when you raised your glasses to your only child. My mother exhaled sharply. It was a joke. No, or we didn't mean it like that, did we? She asked, glancing at my father for backup. You had all night, I said. You didn't say a word. And that's rich, I replied, coming from the people who cut me out with a smile. He shifted his white lips, tightening. 50,000. Sarah, that's not a joke. You were going to give that to us. What? And you gave it to them instead. Silence. My mother's voice cracked with fury disguised as reason. That money could have helped us retire early, pay off the car, cover your father's medical bills. I know, I said simply. That's why I saved it. Then what changed? My father asked, his jaw clenched. I smiled, though it wasn't kind. You toasted to your only child. My mother looked away. My father's silence thickened. Finally, she hissed. So this is revenge? No, I said calmly. This is recognition. I gave my thanks to the people who earned it. You're throwing away your family, my father snapped. I'm finally choosing one, I said. They left after that. Not with a slam, but with a quiet click of the door that somehow felt heavier. That night, I sat on my couch in the dark wine glass in hand, watching the ceiling. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt something else, something both heavier and lighter. The sense that a weight I'd carried all my life had finally been set down. But I knew it wasn't over. Not with people like them. Quiet in my family never meant peace. It only meant the storm was recalibrating. The quiet didn't last. It never does. With my family, silence is not surrender. It's strategy. A few days later, my phone rang with a name I hadn't seen in years. Theo, my cousin. He was the type who forgot birthdays unless Facebook reminded him, who showed up at reunions only for free food. The kind of relative who never calls without a reason. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. Your mom's been saying some things about you. About the money. You might want to check your socials. I didn't use Facebook much anymore, but curiosity got the better of me. When I logged in there, it was a long, meandering post from my mother. Crafted carefully wrapped in weaponized humility, sprinkled with scripture like confetti. It breaks a parent's heart when their child is led astray by people pretending to love them. Family isn't about money, it's about loyalty. We did our best, and now we're being punished for it. Sometimes, evil wears a smile. She hadn't written my name, but she didn't have to. The implication was clear enough for her audience. The comments rolled in loyal as always. Praying for your family. Children forget who carried them when they were helpless. You don't deserve this. You raised them right. I nearly laughed, but my hands trembled. It wasn't the lies that stung, it was the ease with which strangers accepted them. Then came the real blow. My aunt called, her voice shaken. She had received an anonymous email. No subject line, no signature, just screenshots of text messages I'd sent years ago. Old frustrations I'd vented privately, written late at night when exhaustion blurred my patience. Complaints about feeling smothered, sometimes needing space, wishing they wouldn't hover. Words never meant as betrayal, only as steam released into the air. The sender hadn't signed, but it didn't take a detective. It was my sister's handiwork, breadcrumbs left deliberately to point her way. "I know you didn't mean it," my aunt said quietly, "but it hurt to see." I believed her. Not because she was guilt-tripping me, but because she was honest, even when it hurt. Unlike the rest of them, she didn't dress pain in spin. The shame clawed at me anyway. So I drove over to their house with a box of pastries and a knot in my stomach. I sat at their kitchen table, the one that had always felt more like home than my parents' dining room ever did. "I'm sorry," I said, words tumbling out fast. "For everything I ever wrote in frustration, for anything that made you question what you mean to me." My aunt didn't give a speech. She didn't lecture me. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and held on. My uncle poured coffee, like always. No drama, just presence. That was their way. It was in that moment I realized what I had to do. Not just the envelope, not just the stand I'd taken at the dinner. Something more permanent. Something that could not be spun into a rumor or twisted into an anecdote. I needed to draw a line in ink. So I wrote a letter to my parents. Not a rant, not a scream, not even a defense. Just truth. Calm, firm, undeniable. Please don't contact me again. Do not use relatives as messengers. Do not twist the story online. Do not expect reconciliation. I wish you peace, but I'm done playing the part you cast me in. I printed it, folded it neatly, and mailed it. No chance for screenshots, no accusations of "I never saw it." The words were simple, final. A week later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Voicemail again. My mother's voice wet with tears, ending in venom. "You've destroyed this family. You've broken your father's heart. Are you proud of yourself?" I listened, and in the stillness, after I thought, yes, I am. But of course, they didn't stop there. They tried to pressure my aunt and uncle into returning the money. They hinted at manipulation, whispered about instability. Letters arrived with official headers, attempts to scare them into surrender. My uncle, steady as ever, consulted a lawyer just to be safe. I offered to cover the fees. He shook his head. "We don't take from family," he said with a grin. "But we'll accept gifts." My aunt rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her fondness. That was their way of making it easier for me to help without guilt. The holidays approached. For the first time in my life, I didn't go home. I chose their home instead. We cooked together, laughing over burnt pies and lopsided cookies. We played cards until midnight, bragging over meaningless victories. We watched old movies in mismatched pajamas. My aunt knitted me a scarf, sky blue, soft and warm. My uncle made hot chocolate and burned it slightly, and we drank it anyway, because imperfection in their hands always tasted better than perfection anywhere else. One night, sitting by the fire, my aunt asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said, because I hadn't walked away from a family. I had walked toward one. The months that followed felt strangely quiet. Not the suffocating quiet of my parents' dining table, where silence was a weapon, but a gentler one, the kind that hums when a wound finally starts to knit itself closed. I spent more evenings at my aunt and uncle's house, their kitchen table, transforming into a sanctuary where laughter rose without effort. Yet beneath that comfort, I knew better than to believe the storm had truly passed. My family never surrenders. They recalibrate, And sure enough, the next wave came dressed in subtler clothing. My sister, ever the performer, took her grievances online. A photo of my parents' wedding day, captioned in somber italics. Some people only show up when they want applause. Real family shows up quietly. The comments multiplied sympathy flowing in like a tide she had been expecting. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their stage had shrunk to a small echo chamber, and for once, I wasn't sitting in the audience. Still, their campaign continued. Cousins reached out with carefully phrased texts. "I just want to hear your side," one wrote. Another, "You know your parents love you, right? They're just hurt." As though decades of dismissal of erasure could be equated with a single act of defiance. As though my parents had the monopoly on pain. I ignored the messages. I had wasted too many years defending my truth to people who only wanted to twist it. But the hardest blow didn't come from their words. It came from what they tried to do to the two people who had taken me in, who had loved me without conditions. My aunt and uncle began receiving more than phone calls. Letters, official-looking, sealed with intimidation. Language dripping with insinuations. "You may have unduly influenced her. You should reconsider this financial arrangement. It could be seen as manipulation." My uncle, calm as always, brought the stack of envelopes to the kitchen table. He slid them toward me. "They're trying to scare us," he said, matter-of-factly. His voice was steady, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had been dragged into a war he never asked for. I offered to handle it, to take the burden back onto my shoulders. He shook his head. "No, we'll consult a lawyer, just to make sure we're safe." Guilt twisted inside me. "I'll pay," I insisted. He chuckled, light cutting through the heaviness. "We don't take from family," he said, then winked. "But gifts, we'll accept those." My aunt swatted his arm, rolling her eyes, but her smile betrayed affection. They turned even this into something softer, something that didn't sting. Christmas came. For the first time, I didn't even glance at my parents' invitation. I chose my place, their house. We strung lights that tangled more than they decorated. We cooked side by side recipes half-remembered, improvised with laughter. We played cards, argued over rules no one remembered, and fell asleep in front of an old black-and-white film with mugs of burnt hot chocolate cooling in our hands. It wasn't grand. There were no rented halls, no speeches, no party favors. But it was real. For the first time, I felt what holidays were supposed to feel like, not performance, but presence. On Christmas Eve, my aunt handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a scarf, knitted by her own hands, soft and warm in a shade of blue that reminded me of winter skies just before snow. I pulled it around my shoulders, and she asked, voice gentle, "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I didn't even need to think. "No," I said, because regret would mean I wished I hadn't spoken, hadn't acted, hadn't finally stood up. But I had. And for once, I had chosen myself. In the weeks after, I watched as the noise from my parents dwindled. Their online posts lost traction. Their allies grew tired of the drama. Silence crept back in, but this time it wasn't my silence. It was theirs. And still, in the quiet hours before dawn, I found myself replaying that dinner. The moment my sister lifted her glass and erased me with a smile. The way my parents had joined her complicit in their silence. The look on my aunt's face when I handed her the envelope, stunned, afraid but honored. Sometimes I wondered if I had gone too far. Should I have waited until later, until privacy softened the blow? Should I have slipped the envelope into their hands quietly without witnesses? Would it have spared me the storm that followed? But then I pictured the alternative. If I had done it in secret, my parents would have spun it anyway. They would have told the family I had caused a scene, that I had been dramatic, that I had lashed out. Because invisibility had never required evidence, silence would have protected them, not me. By placing the truth in the open, I had ensured that for once it couldn't be erased. That realization steadied me. It reminded me that my choice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about recognition. I had finally honored the people who had truly shown up for me. And it was the first time in my life I felt I belonged. Spring arrived quietly. Soft rains washing the sidewalks, clean new blossoms unfurling as if the world had decided to try again. I found myself sitting on my porch one evening, scarf wrapped snugly around my neck, a glass of wine in hand. The air was cool, fragrant, with damp earth. For the first time in years, my chest didn't ache with the weight of unmet expectations. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a call, a look, a crumb of acknowledgement. I was simply breathing, existing, and it was enough. But the past has a way of tugging on loose threads. A final ripple came when I received a card in the mail addressed in my mother's handwriting. The envelope was thick, almost trembling with her pressure. Inside was a note that began with tears and ended in venom, her words oscillating like a pendulum. You've destroyed this family. You've broken your father's heart. One day, you'll regret this. One day, you'll see what you've done. I held the paper in my hands, the ink smudged as if her fingers had trembled. For a long moment, I just stared. Then I folded it back into the envelope, set it in a drawer, and closed it. I didn't tear it up because tearing it would mean I wanted to erase it. But I didn't leave it out either. I left it in that drawer as a reminder not of their cruelty, but of my choice to stop letting it define me. By then, my parents' campaign had lost momentum. Their allies had grown bored. Even my sister's carefully curated online theatrics had started to lose their shine, her words fading into the endless scroll. And maybe that was the greatest punishment of all, not my defiance, not the envelope, but the silence of an audience that no longer cared to applaud. Without spectators, their drama shriveled. Meanwhile, my life grew fuller. I found myself laughing more, breathing easier. My freelance work expanded in ways I hadn't dared to dream. My aunt and uncle were there at every step, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with quiet consistency. A pot of soup when I worked too late. A text that simply read, "Proud of you." A place at their table that didn't need to be earned. They became not just family, but home. Still, there were nights when the memory returned, my sister lifting her glass, that single sentence slicing me out of existence. Thank you for raising an only child. It used to haunt me, that moment. It used to feel like a wound I couldn't stop reopening. Now, when I replayed it, I felt something else: clarity. I hadn't been erased because I was unworthy. I had been erased because they refused to see me. And there's a difference. One strips you of value, the other strips them of honesty. That night at the dinner, I finally chose to stop begging for their honesty, and instead gave my gratitude to those who had already lived it. The letter I sent to my parents remained unanswered, at least in any way that mattered. They tried once more to push my aunt and uncle into returning the money, even suggested it was the only way reconciliation could happen. My uncle smiled when he told me about it, a smile lined with both sadness and strength. We told them no, he said simply. Because this isn't about money. It never was. And he was right. The money was never the point. It was a symbol, a translation of all the invisible ways they had shown up for me, distilled into something undeniable. I remember one night in particular. We were sitting around their kitchen table cards, scattered coffee mugs cooling. My uncle leaned back, looking at me with a kind of gentle pride I had never seen in my father's eyes. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. "You changed the rules. You stopped playing a game that was rigged against you." My aunt nodded, squeezing my hand. "And you built a new one where you belong." I swallowed hard tears, pricking my eyes, because for once I believed them. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered, could I have done it differently? Could I have found a softer way to step away? But then, I remembered all the years I had already tried softness, all the years of silence, compromise, small sacrifices, hoping it would earn me even a fragment of what my sister received effortlessly. I remembered every shrug, every dismissive nod, every forgotten milestone. And I knew the truth: no amount of softness could have rewritten their story. It wasn't that I failed to shine, it was that they refused to look. And once I accepted that I was free, the lesson I realized wasn't about revenge or even recognition. It was about boundaries, about the courage to draw a line and say this far, no further. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are the architecture that allows love to exist without collapsing. By choosing my aunt and uncle, I wasn't throwing my family away. I was stepping toward the version of family that had always been there waiting. The version that didn't require me to shrink. Months later, I found myself sitting on their porch, the three of us wrapped in blankets sipping tea as fireflies blinked in the dusk. My aunt turned to me, her voice soft. "Do you miss them?" The question startled me, though I knew she meant it with love. I thought for a moment. "I miss the idea of them," I admitted. "The parents I thought I had, the ones I kept hoping would appear." I paused, watching the fireflies flicker. "But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss being invisible." She nodded, squeezing my hand. That was enough. Looking back now, I don't see that dinner as the night everything fell apart. I see it as the night I finally stopped apologizing for existing. The night I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead. The night I finally handed my gratitude to the people who had earned it, not the people who demanded it. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the envelope, not the silence, not the fallout. Because it led me here to a life where love is quiet, consistent, and real. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt erased, ever felt like your worth depended on shrinking to fit someone else's script, hear me. You don't have to play that role anymore. You can choose differently. You can step away. You can build your own table and fill it with people who see you. That night, when my sister raised her glass and toasted to being an only child, I thought I had lost everything. But in truth, it was the night I found everything that mattered. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about family choices and the courage to stand your ground. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my place?